Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be focusing on the full moon in Aquarius on the 9th of August. And I'm going to be looking at that from the perspective of the 12 signs. So everybody's catered for, and I know how much you love it. But of course, I'm also going to be talking about what's significant about this time, not just in terms of the full moon, but of course, what's going on at the same time as the full moon in the background of things. Just in case you like this as much as I do, I like the Native American names for these particular full moons, and this one is called a sturgeon moon. And of course, it reflects the idea of the spawning of, the eggs, the sturgeon eggs. And I kind of like that idea. It's kind of going along with Leo. The sun is in Leo, so we've got the fertility aspect of all of that. And we also have, see, the moon in Aquarius. And it is considered to be really a time of healing and also a time of awakening, really, although we usually think of that as a Uranian thing. Although I suppose you could say with the moon in Aquarius, one of its modern ruler, Uranus, that's why we also look at the idea of awakenings. Now, one of the things I'm going to be talking about, probably after I've talked about not exactly the science bits, but there's something going on at the moment that I really should mention. But I'm going to be looking at the configurations that are impacting our astrology and this particular full moon. You may remember that on my video about the new moon in Leo, which was opposing Pluto, I looked at the idea of the cradles and what they meant in astrological terms. And around about that time, we had a lot going on in the world. I think I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it for when I actually start talking about the configurations that we've got that are very much a part of this story for this particular video. But yes, I want to, first of all, talk about something that there's a lot of talk about. And the talk really is about what's going on with the sun. The sun is very active at the moment. It's the peak of the sunspot cycle. It's an 11-year cycle, and we're at the peak of it at the moment. And what has also happened, what has also opened up is a kind of coronal hole. Now, the sun, the corona of the sun, if you like, there's this it's not a portal that's opened up, it's actually a space that's opened up. And as this happens, it's to do with the magnetic field on the sun, if you like, then a lot of solar flares are emanating from this hole. And of course, once you get that kind of activity on the sun, it can, those solar flares, they can conduct, if you like, the magnet, I'm not a scientist, but it can get into Earth's magnetic field as well. And it is thought at this time, from some evidence, that when that happens at a pitch, which appears to be happening and will continue to happen around the period I'm talking about, then you get disruption with radio communications, you get satellite interference. And so all these things that we have in space, these high-tech things that give us our communication systems, and sometimes something like this can have a huge effect in terms of our communication systems. But what is really grabbing people's attention is this idea that with this increased activity, this is coinciding with the earthquakes that we seem to be having more and more of. If you remember, we go back to, I think, the spring period in the waters of Italy, there were hundreds of tiny little quakes, and everybody thought this might precipitate an even bigger one. Never happened. And we had the same thing happening in Japan more recently, at the very beginning of July, when there were again hundreds of little quakes. And I think one of the islands just off the coast of Japan, they evacuated for fear that there was going to be a big eruption, and that might even cause a tsunami. So Japan is already on high alert, and I'll take you out, we'll have a look at Japan's chart in a minute. But in terms of real scientific evidence, there is absolutely no connection between activity, solar flares, sunspot cycle, and earthquakes. There is no discernible evidence for it. And I think we have to say that because it would be wrong not to say it. The fact that we are noticing what's going on and thinking that there are some very strange kind of patterns of earthquakes happening at this time, and it is at the peak of the sunspot cycle, naturally, we're going to make the assumption that this may have something to do with it. But there is no evidence, as I said, for it. However, there was a really big earthquake off the coast of Alaska on the Aleutian Islands, and that was registered 7.3 on the Richter scale. So it was quite a large one. And that part of the world happens to be on the kind of northernmost edge of the Ring of Fire, which is in the Pacific. And the Pacific, this Ring of Fire also includes Japan, Indonesia, Chile, an enormous number of countries that are on that particular, it's not a fault line, it's just where we experience a lot of earthquakes and volcanoes. So it seems the evidence is mounting, but I wouldn't get too caught up in it. Because, there was this kind of alert. People did think that around about the 5th of July, there was going to be this massive eruption in Japan, and it never actually happened. So, we've got to remain we've got to have our scientific hats on. We can't go running with the ball here and assuming that, what's going on in the sun with this peak of the sunspot cycle is going to coincide or cause more earthquakes. Now, I want to quickly show you the chart of Japan, since we just mentioned that during the course of July, there was a kind of fear that there was going to be this huge mega quake around about the 5th of July, which never actually happened. But I think it provides a very interesting chart for us to look at in terms of why we would be focusing on Japan at this particular time. Now, the full moon itself occurs at 17 of Aquarius Leo. And if you look at this chart, you'll find Pluto at 19 degrees of Leo. So in other words, Japan's Pluto is going to be the focus for this particular full moon on the 9th of August. Now, when we think of Pluto, we think about what lies beneath, and we think about what's hidden coming up to the surface. We think about death and rebirth. We think of renewal, and actually that's another theme of this full moon in Aquarius is renewal. So we see these good things, but as you may know, Japan and the government is in a state of disorder at the moment. There's a lot of turmoil within the government, and probably at this time when we find this full moon on Pluto, this is going to be a really difficult time for Japan and its government, and also finance, because for Japan, that Pluto is in the 8th house of financial relationships. So we're looking at its relationship with other countries. We're looking at all sorts of big and important financial deals. So there's going to be definitely some problems. I mean, we could look at a full moon, because the theme of a full moon is always closure and completion. And therefore we could see that perhaps there's going to be a big deal done at this time. And who knows, maybe that's one of those Donald Trump's big, beautiful deals. But at the same time, it can also bring a situation to crisis points. So we've got a mass crisis on our hands, probably governmentally, in Japan around the time of this full moon. But of course, when we think about what lies beneath, and we think about disruption and rupture, elimination, and all of those things that we know about Pluto, then we could also see that perhaps this could be a moment when there is more seismic activity around Japan, and maybe it's a little bit more serious than the more recent ones have been. But there's another reason, or two more reasons, why this chart is interesting in terms, well, now terms of what's going on now and also of earthquakes. In the amount of research I've done on earthquakes, and you can find this on my website, I've got one of my newsletters that you can get, which covers earthquakes and volcanoes. And 28 degrees of Gemini really seem to figure within a kind of uncanny frequency. Again, it isn't every time something happens at 28 of Gemini, there's a massive earthquake, but it's curious that 28 degrees of Gemini appears to be in the mix somewhere. And Japan's natal chart has the moon at 28 degrees of Gemini. And of course, Japan is right on this ring of fire. It's in a very, very powerful part of the ring of fire, if you like. There are a lot of earthquakes in that area. So they've even got that idea stamped in their natal chart with the idea of where the moon is. But I also want you to look at this other configuration. We need to go to the very top of the chart, round about the 12 noon position, and we see Saturn and Neptune in conjunction, quite wide, but Saturn was moving towards Neptune for its conjunction. This happened in 1952, 1953. Well, 1952, actually, that's when the conjunction in Libra was. So Japan was born under a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And what is happening at the moment is that we have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries. So we're having a resonance with the birth of Japan. So this is also a time, well, we've used the word renewal, but we talk about end of regimes with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So very clearly we can see that there's going to be a change of government here and a lot of problems with all of that going on at this time. But the other point I wanted to make about this Saturn-Neptune conjunction is that I'm noticing more often now that people who are born on a Saturn-Neptune conjunction really are having experiences right now that are of that kind of experience. It's the sense that you're in a dream world, whether things are happening in a way that you feel destiny is happening, that, you know, dreams that you've had are being proved realizable. But the other side of that is that the dreams you want, you're realizing, are not realizable. So we're getting the two here. We're getting a lot of other layers of this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. But what I found very interesting was that there has been this huge surge of interest in the Jeffrey Epstein affair. And I don't know where we are with that. I'm recording this video on the 21st of July. So there was a lot of activity last week. And the most recent development was that Donald Trump has now sued the Wall Street Journal, I think for 10 billion, saying that a story is fake. They faked some kind of greeting purportedly from him to Epstein on Epstein's 50th birthday. And, you know, his MAGA base is really calling for a real full disclosure of what's, you know, what was happening with Epstein in terms of the powerful people he knew, and they want full disclosure. So all of this is happening at this particular time. And what I found so interesting was that Jeffrey Epstein was born on a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So it's almost like that resonance with the original birth pattern is now, you know, that's why we're suddenly hearing about all of this again. It's coming back to haunt us. How Neptunian, the idea of a spirit coming back to haunt us. And there is something about that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is square the sun in Jeffrey Epstein's chart. that sort of shows the nefariousness of his activities, the underworld, the hints at intelligence and secret accounts and relationships of power and blackmail and all of that going on, very Sun square Saturn-Neptune. But in my Friday Bite, I made the point, you know what? Someone else with a different consciousness, we might say a different destiny, could have been a saint, could have been someone who was a great humanitarian and brought good things to happen in a very highly motivated way. This is what's interesting about astrology out there. You know, it's just not, you know, a one-trick pony. It's just one thing. Everything we look at has layers of meaning. And when you think about different levels of consciousness, our makeup, our genetic makeup, our psychic makeup, this all plays into the chart that we have and the vibration with which we connect with all the planetary configurations in our natal chart, which is just fascinates me about this idea of a resonance of Saturn Neptune at the moment, and it even having this effect on somebody who is no longer with us. So I thought that was really rather important. And talking about this idea of, you know, earthquakes and moving away slightly from this idea of the sunspot cycle and solar flares and the trans-equatorial coronal hole. Incidentally, do you realize what the acronym for that is? It's TECH, TECH, one way of remembering it. If we move away from that for a minute and have a look at something else that I really discovered when I was researching earthquakes, it's this idea that eclipses are important. They leave their signatures behind on earthquakes and volcanoes when they happen. And we've got a very, very important solar eclipse coming up on the 21st of September. And that is at 29 degrees of Virgo. It's exactly opposite the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. It is squaring that all-important 28 degrees, which seems to have a part to play often in eruptions of one sort or another. So I think if we are looking to see whether, you know, the Earth does indeed move, I would probably be looking more towards that period of the year than I am at this particular point. Although when I look at the new moon in August, and that too, that's a fortnight after the 9th of August, I think that brings us to the 21st of August, then that is exactly square Uranus, and that's also quite shocking, quite a sense of something erupting. So we have got some points in the astrology that are going to make us sit up and take notice. But as I said, I wouldn't get too carried away with the idea of this coronal hole, and whether you can see a figure 7 in it, or, you know, what other people are saying. I think we need to reserve judgment on that and focus on what we know. Okay. So let's have a look at this chart of the full moon, which I have set from the point of view of Ukraine. I'm very interested in the Ukraine situation at the moment. And of course, I'm looking ahead of time, you know, as I record this. But interestingly enough, that 17 degrees of Leo Aquarius, which is the full moon, is squaring Ukraine's Pluto. So I think that is significant in the sense of, you know, another key development in the war with Russia. And I think it's too soon to say that, you know, this full moon and the significance of all the important configurations happening at the time could signify maybe the end of this war. But we're not too far from that 50-day deadline that Donald Trump set for Russia to come to the table. So I think we're going to see some very, very important developments in Ukraine around the time of this particular full moon. And I'm going to, I'm not going to hedge my bets here. My whole feeling about Ukraine is that ultimately they will triumph, but a large part of that has to do with Russia's situation and the demise of Putin in one form or another. That would certainly bring the war in Ukraine to an end. And I'm kind of expecting that rather more than some kind of enormous victory on Ukraine's part on the battlefield. But there's something going on here with all of that. But moving aside again from Ukraine, and you can see I've drawn in some configurations there with red lines and blue lines. I'm going to take those apart in a minute. But I want to have a look at what is going on at the time. Now, if we stretch back about 9 days, we get to the beginning of August, we have Venus angling that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in this chart is in about the 4 o'clock position. So Venus, the planet of love, the planet of form and balance, finance. Venus represents many, many things. Angling Venus and Saturn, angling Neptune and Saturn is quite an important juncture. Venus is a much more important planet than we think. So around this time, last week of July, first week of August, again, we're looking at, discussions, ceasefires, things reaching, the necessity to talk peace. And sometimes you have to go to war to get peace. So this is why Venus is often intrinsically involved in conflicts of one sort or another. So this is going to be a very important period for conflicts generally, not necessarily specifically in Israel, Gaza, or Syria, or Yemen, or Ukraine. But that Venus square Saturn and Neptune is significant. Now, one of the things I like about a Venus, Saturn square in particular, is that it is very good for weddings or for signing contracts or for doing things that you want to have to last a long time. Now, Neptune's in there as well, which seems counterintuitive, and you might say, well, doesn't that mean that the likelihood of something lasting a long time is eroded by Neptune's presence? But I think the implication of these two has such a lot to do with affairs of state and affairs, big affairs in terms of what happens in individual lives too. We need to look at them as a couple and see that a marriage made on an angle, Venus, or as we're going to come to it in a minute, Mars opposition Saturn and Neptune, then we've got something here that says, that this has got long-term consequences. Let's at least put it like that. So even though sometimes when we have Venus and Saturn in play, we can feel as though life is hard and that it does seem as though there isn't a lot of joy to be had. There can be a lot of purpose in what we're doing. And I think this period, this first half of August, is full of purpose, if nothing else, whether you want to apply that to yourself and your life, or whether you want to look out there and think about global situations. Now, if we go down on the left-hand side of this horoscope, you'll see I printed some dates out. So on the 6th of August, Mars enters Libra. And really, for about, at least 10 days before that, Mars has been edging nearer and nearer towards that opposite position, and it's going to be exact on the day of the full moon, the 9th of August. So this is very significant indeed. And if we look at a Mars opposition Saturn-Neptune in its most negative aspect, we could say that things at this point fall apart at the seams completely. There is absolute chaos. There is absolute mayhem. Nobody knows what's going on. There's too much secrecy. There's too much confusion. There is the fog of war all of these things are portrayed by a Mars opposition Saturn-Neptune. On the positive side, we get a real force for peace, for long-term peace, for sorting out problems, finding resolution. You know, we use that term sometimes, don't we? Force-backed diplomacy. And I think we could look at this Mars opposition Saturn and Neptune with Venus not too far away from the center point, if you like. We could be looking at that in a sense and see this is where there is a huge surge of activity in the pursuit of peace. Nevertheless, looked at overall, this period is fairly chaotic, but then we bring order out of chaos with Saturn and Neptune, and we must work hard to do that in our individual circumstances a bit as much as we must look at the world and its massive kind of problems at the moment and hope that there are enough wise people to bring order out of chaos. So these are just the two ways of looking at how that Mars opposition Saturn and Neptune will work. Now, by the time we get to the 10th of August, we're also seeing Mars trining Pluto. But as I often say, you've got to look at what the planets mean rather than the fact that they are in a harmonious angle with each other. Mars and Pluto are difficult planets. They're always going to be rubbing each other up the wrong way. Maybe there will be a great drive to succeed, a great drive to get things the way they should be. But this is not an easy pair of planets. And even if you end up with something at the end of it, which means you've transformed a situation, good Plutonic world, it's taken one hell of an effort to get there. So don't necessarily think because there are trines or sextiles involved, you've got everything easy peasy. That isn't the case. And of course, this comes pretty much at the same time as you've got this Mars opposition, Neptune and Saturn, and the full moon. What we're seeing at this time, the full moon is not part of the configurations that I'm going to be talking about, but what the full moon does is bring things to a head. We've got some themes in general about a full moon to look at. We look at the idea of closure and completion. We experience and hope to experience closure on a full moon. But we get simmering situations reaching boiling point. Now, that sometimes can mean a settlement can be reached, but it sometimes means there's just utter, this is the end. This is everything that's been bottling up now comes pouring out, and there is a period where there is separation rather than union and unity, which is also implicit, really. In a full moon, you do get separation instead. Another word that I use a lot, or another phrase that I use a lot in terms of a full moon, is this idea of drawing conclusions. And you can take that two ways. When we draw a conclusion, we reach an understanding. Oh, I get it. I see I see. That kind of drawing conclusions. But we can also say when we draw to a conclusion, we're coming to an end. So there's an ending. And although we look at this particular chart and think about, this is massive, this is an ending with knobs on, we've got another 2 weeks of this cycle, really, as the moon wanes towards the new moon. This is still an active period for absolutely everything that I'm talking about on this particular video. Another theme to think of with full moons is reaching a crossroads. And that might be really helpful to some of you who are trying to figure out what it means. And that you don't necessarily design that. It's just that events conspire to bring you to a crossroads. And then you make a choice, don't you? Do I go right? Do I go left? Do I go straight on? And that's free will coming into play. with the point at which you've reached, which appears to all intents and purposes to be brought about by fate. Circumstances have brought you to this point. What you do about it is an act of free will, of choice, and that's really important. If we look a little bit further along here, we come to the 11th of August. This is a couple of days after the full moon, and Mercury turns direct. It's been retrograde through all this period, really since the 17th of July, which is a rather added complication, really, to all the other things going on. When we think, I mentioned the Epstein affair a little earlier, and there's so much obfuscation there. You know, who did what, when, why, who, where's that gone? Was it there? No, it isn't. There's a lot of that going on. And you added Mercury retrograde into that so that information goes missing. There's a lot of lost information on a retrograde Mercury. But on the 11th of August, Mercury turns direct. And although communications don't just snap back overnight as Mercury turns direct, from that point, things do start to straighten out a bit. But what also happens is that things that we missed, things that went unnoticed, now reveal themselves. So we end up seeing mistakes and errors that were made, things that we didn't think were important turn out to be super important. And of course, what makes this even more complicated is that this is holiday season in the Northern Hemisphere. So a lot of companies have got short-staffed. So if you want to get something or complain about it or get information, the person who can give you that is on holiday. Or you are on holiday and you are away from your desk and you have no idea that something has landed on that desk that needed immediate attention. But as soon as Mercury turns retrograde on a Monday, in fact, I think, then all these things start to reveal themselves. So it can be a very enlightening period, and not necessarily an enjoyable one. And I'm going to end here on the Tuesday, the following day, 12th of August, the glorious 12th, no less, Saturn sextiling Uranus and a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. So that beautiful Venus-Jupiter conjunction has been building for at least 7 days before that. So we would go back to about the 2nd, 3rd of August. And that's a really positive kind of influence. There's a lot of joy in a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And I love saying that because we don't say it enough. We got the lesser benefic Venus with the greater benefic Jupiter. They're occupying the same space in the zodiac. That's really, really good news. So maybe some of the trials and tribulations, misunderstandings and missteps will turn out to have a happy ending. And I would absolutely love that to happen. As regards the Saturn-Uranus sextile, well, you know, Saturn and Uranus were in square in 2022, 2023. It went on for quite a long time. And it was all around the time of the invasion of Ukraine, back we come to Ukraine again. So this sort of adds fuel to the fire that there is something going on with the war in Ukraine that may be speaking of things getting to a point where everything is going to turn in a new direction. And I think maybe we get that a little bit from that Saturn-Uranus sextile. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take apart those geometric patterns that you could see in the chart of the full moon. And I'm going to take them bit by bit so you can see them. What we have here are called kites. We have 2 kites, and we also have, well, if I break that down, you'll see how we end up with an even bigger configuration called a mystic triangle. So the kite we're going to look at first is the one between Mars, Uranus, and Pluto, forming the base of it, if you like. And we've got the Mercury-Pluto opposition forming the strut. Now, this essentially is a configuration made up of one hard aspect and several what we might call harmonious aspects. But you know what I think about harmonious aspects. I've just been through that in terms of planets being in the same room. You've got to look at the planets involved, not necessarily at whether they're in harmony or in inverted commas or not. So what we're sort of seeing here is that the tension between Mercury and Pluto is holding this configuration together. That's what unites it. So we can see here with Mars and Uranus and Pluto all being in trine with each other in a grand trine. We also know that when we break that down, we have also, well, now I'm going to leave that for a second. Let me not get too involved, otherwise I'll confuse you completely. But it's almost as though the tension in that kite is what causes the effect of the whole configuration to become active. So we can see resolution always when we've got planets in alignment around that opposition. The opposition is between Mercury and Pluto. Mercury, the principle of communication, of discussion, debate, movement, opposition Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, transformation, what's coming up that's been hidden, coming up to the surface to be seen. So we could make a translation of this particular configuration and say that what comes up from the dark, what erupts at this time, will have some kind of beneficial outcome. If you have a kite in your own chart, we look at the grand trine and we think about grand trines as denoting some kind of gift. Now you could look at that as a karmic gift, something you've brought with you from past times, or you could look at it as a genetic gift, something that your ancestors and that you have given to you by your genes has given you a special gift, a special talent. But in order to manifest that talent, you need something gritty to make it work. It's not going to work by itself. You need a configuration like this. You need the toughness, the tension in order to manifest what is God-given. Let's say that's one way of looking at it. If we move down and we have a look at this second kite, we see this one is formed again by the grand trine involving Mars, Uranus, and Pluto. But this time, instead of Mercury opposing Pluto, forging the strut, the tension, the planets that hold it together, we've got Mars opposing that Neptune-Saturn conjunction. And if you remember a little while back, I talked about the positive and negative effects of that particular combination. So here again, we have tension and difficulty, turmoil and upset, leading to or helping manifest ultimately a good solution. That's one very quick and easy way of looking at that configuration. So now we come to the mystic envelope, not the mystic envelope, the mystic rectangle. And you can see here how Mars and Mercury, Saturn and Pluto, sextiles between the two of them. And then we see Mercury trining the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, Mars trining the Pluto, forming the basis of that rectangle. And on this occasion, we've got an extra dimension to the mystic triangle. We've got the sextile from Mercury to Uranus and from Uranus to Neptune and Saturn. It looks like an envelope, and an easy way of trying to interpret what this envelope configuration is, and to a certain extent, even just the mystic triangle itself, mystic rectangle itself, is that there is something we can't see. There is something secreted that we may never see. We may never see it. It may remain under wraps forever. We may never see it. On the other hand, we may glimpse it, and maybe that's nearer the mark. And this ties in with the configurations that we have at this time, all these major configurations, is this idea that we cannot know why things are happening the way they are. We do not know the stories behind the stories. We do not know the channels that are going between this individual and that individual, that nation and this nation, that intelligence group to this one. But we just know as we look at it that there's something we cannot know. Maybe it is even we cannot understand going on, but it's taking shape. We've got a configuration which is a shape. So whatever we cannot see, or whatever we cannot really know the nature of, is taking shape. And I think this is a very, very powerful way of looking at the configurations that we have here. They're there for a reason. And I hope really I've kind of enlightened you a bit about it, about them, by breaking it down. And I talked in my previous video about the idea of why configurations are important, and I talked about resonance. I talked about the fact that with planets at the similar degree areas, they're all on a kind of having a chain reaction. They're all resonating at the same pitch, and they are causing, or they are presiding over events, if you like, that have that kind of effect. There are mighty effects going on with what we can see in terms of the geometry and the resonance that the planets are creating. But I hope that idea of breaking them down for you helps you to see a little bit clearer about why, I would be talking in this way about the particular time we're going through, and also an explanation for why the events in your life are taking place and the nature of the incredibly intense nature of those events. And also when we look at what's going on globally, we just know that big things are happening right now, world-shaping things. We are moving into a new era, and what's going on right now is part of the movements of the tectonic plates of humanity, of the world, of governments, all of it. And we're seeing this pictured astrologically by these configurations. Now, I had meant to say something else, and I probably am going to leave it to my conclusion. But there are two ways of looking at this. And I know a lot of people are talking about energy changes in consciousness, and that we look at these alignments and see these are the signatures on the raising of consciousness, on divine consciousness. I talked about that a lot, and my version of events isn't quite like that. But what I would say is, and we've been talking about earthquakes, we've been talking about resonances, vibrations, we're talking about all of the stuff that I've just mentioned. And we know that animals are very sensitive to subtle vibrational changes, which is why you get animals rushing up to the hillside before an earthquake or a tsunami. So they sense that vibration. And I would say that there are lots and lots of people who are sensitive to that kind of vibration. That's a real vibration. And I don't think it can be confused with the idea of a consciousness vibration, in the sense of this wave of divine consciousness coming in. I think the two are very separate. So I think those of you who might feel edgy or might sense something is going to happen, you're at the edge of a precipice, something big is happening. It's rather like that sensation of I got to move, something's going to happen right now. And in a way, that's the sensitivity to the real vibrations that are going on seismically. So I thought I wanted to make a point about that at this particular stage. So let's get on and start looking at this full moon and the implications of what's going on sign by sign. And before I do that, especially as I know I've got a lot of new viewers and who possibly aren't as familiar with the way I work as all of you who followed me for a long time. But when I show the charts and talk about Aries or Pisces or Scorpio, whatever it may be, on one side you'll see I've written Sun Pisces, and on the opposite side I've written Pisces rising. So you've got two ways of looking at it. You can, if you know nothing about astrology, you only know your sun sign, then listen to the sun sign and my interpretation for that sun sign. If you know your natal chart, you know your rising sign, and you know the degree of that rising sign, then you'll know exactly where this full moon is occurring and the shape of everything else around it. So you'll look at that. And you can look at both. There is a reason I think the sun sign is always valid. The sun is the center of our solar system, and in a way, it's the center of our being. And so looking at it from the solar perspective has a validity, even though perhaps the more important one is to do with your rising sign. Now, the moon sign plays no part in this at all. That being said, if you've got the moon in Aquarius, and this is, remember, a full moon in Aquarius, this may have more or may make more of an impact on you in terms of everything I've talked about, in terms of endings, of reaching a crossroads, closure and completion, simmering situations, reaching the bubble. If you have a moon in Aquarius, but then the closer it is to that degree of 17 of Aquarius, the more impact it will have on you. If you've got a moon at, let's say, 2 of Aquarius, well, of course, that's opposition Pluto, so that's significant in its own way, but it's not really part of this narrative, okay? And if you've got something maybe at 28 of Aquarius, it's a little bit too far away from the full moon to be necessarily super important for you. But the idea that your moon sign might also form the perspective from where you look at, what's going on, with everything else, I think it is a little bit spurious. Certainly in Western astrology, we use the tropical zodiac, not the sidereal zodiac. But in Vedic astrology, then the position of the moon, using it as an ascending sign, has it has a validity of its own. And I'm not a Vedic astrologer, and I don't do Vedic astrology here, which is why I don't use the moon sign as any form of lens through which you would look at this full moon. Okay, so let's go. So I'm going to start with you, Aquarius, because the full moon is in your sign. The sun is opposition the moon in Aquarius. This is the full moon. And you'll see that I've drawn out these two kite formations. And if you look very carefully, you'll see the envelope and the mystic triangle as well. And, mystic rectangle as well. And so it puts you really, because the full moon is in your sign, we've got this idea that this is a very, very important part of the year. You are an Aquarian. The moon is in the same sign as your sun sign. So there may be often at this period of the year, August, late July, August, is always significant for you in some way. Now, it may be significant this time because the full moon is taking place across the relationship axis. And we have Mercury in the relationship sector as well, opposing Pluto. So we have got a lot relating to relationships. It's a big picture. Is it that you are at a point at which, and remember, we looked at renewal with this idea of the moon in Aquarius, didn't we? That it is time to renew a relationship. Maybe it's even time to remake your vows. Or is it the time simply to take the time to look and work on your relationship so that you bring back that sense of togetherness. You actively work towards getting back the spark, getting back what brought you together in the first place as a couple. That would definitely apply to this kind of configuration. But just as easily, we could be looking at the end of a road. Remember, we've reached a crossroads, an ending, a sense of an ending is there. And so maybe now the writing on the wall is not just evident, but you have reached that point where you think, I can't go on, or the two of you together reach some understanding that it is time to separate, or time to find some distance between you, whether that is in order to come together in the future, or whether it's just giving you time to separate and think about what kind of plans that you want to make for no longer being with each other. Now, of course, that's easy to see when we are looking at a marriage or a long-term romantic relationship, but this could apply really to your relationship with a company. So that you've reached the end of the line with a company. You're going to end your contract, or your contract is going to be ended. It could be a business partnership. It could even be a very, very close friendship. But whatever it is, we've got this mixture of fate bringing things to a crossroads, bringing things to the bubble. And from that point, either resolution or really separation. We've got those two themes going particularly strongly. We also have Mercury opposing Pluto, which means it's time to talk the talk. So all sorts of important discussions could be taking place at this time, whether they are about the future of a relationship, which is most likely, or just simply big discussions happening between you and another person, or you and a group of people. And it's really vitally important. There's going to be some very big things coming out of the things you're talking about. When I look at the full moon, and the full moon is in your sign, I'm always looking at empowerment. We're empowered when we have a full moon in our sign. And I think sometimes that's very important to remember, because often we do feel kind of moved about by events and other people, and we sort of feel our power drained and our ability to influence the situation waning. But I think when we feel our power, when we feel who we are at core level, and we retain and we get that sense, that big sense in our core of having power over ourselves, then I think we can change the dynamics of a situation without necessarily having to shout about things. We can just find our power and deal with it. And I think when you look at all these other configurations that are happening at this time, yes, I do feel there's a lot of the force of destiny here. I do. But you have a part to play in that force of destiny. And once something has happened, the more you can acquire distance and perspective and see that situation from a lot of angles, take the higher path, see the distance, put the distance between you and the emotions and the little self-interpretations, then you can make good decisions, and what arises from those good decisions is a beautiful future. And I think that's unlocking the mystery, if you like, of these important configurations. Okay, Aquarius? Pisces. This full moon is taking place in the 12th house of your solar chart. The sun in the 6th house, the moon in the 12th house. And as you can see, the full moon has no part in the configurations that I've been talking about earlier on this video. But you can see quite clearly the mystic rectangle, and you can see the kites that are forming within that geometric configuration. If I break down the full moon for you, cutting across this 6th, 12th axis, This is very much about life purpose. And I hear a lot of this recently, a lot of people questioning what life is about. I mean, we're here for a reason. We must be here for a reason, even if we do not know what it is. There is that sense that is prevalent at the moment because of what's going on in the world. There's got to be a reason for this. And I think with the 6th, 12th house and the illuminating qualities of a full moon, we have this idea of getting somewhere with the idea of, that's why I'm here. And it is almost always something to do with an act of service. I had someone ask me a question about the 6th house and why I put savor in that 6th house. And that is because, that is an act you do in spiritual service. It's a very mundane act that you do selflessly. And that is part of your spiritual journey. And somehow on this full moon, you may well get more than an inkling of why you have a connection to this person, to what you're doing at the time, to why you want to be there, go there, do that. There is a sense of illumination, a sense that that is part of your purpose. And it is a very spiritual axis, that 6th, 12th axis. On the one end, the sun in the 6th house it's the engine of the horoscope, really. That's where everything runs from the 6th house, and our health system, our life system, our daily system is all 6th house. But then when we think of that act of savor, service, in the pursuit of our spiritual path, everything that we do on a daily basis has to do with our spiritual journey as well, every bit as much as having some extraordinary experience or otherworldly experience. And of course, because we've got Mars opposing Saturn and Neptune, we've got the big configuration, Mercury to Pluto. In there as well is this idea that maybe this is a huge time of awakening for you, of realizing all sorts of things that you didn't realize before, and maybe getting quite a spiritual charge out of it all, because it is illuminating in some regard. And even if you find yourself beset with a lot of difficulties at this time, a very heavy set of burdens to bear, that out of those burdens comes the enlightenment and the understanding of why they're there. And that in turn is part of your purpose. Don't be afraid to get to the bottom of something, Pisces. If you have to dig and delve and get to what's the root of something, remember that Mercury-Pluto opposition is the strut of one of those kites. By going deep, what do we say? They go low, you go high. Well, it's a similar principle in that the deeper you go, the higher the result. And I think there's a lot in this full moon about all of that. And don't get too caught up. It just has to be on that day. It has to be on the 9th of August. Remember, there's a period surrounding this and going on for a couple of weeks where everything that I'm saying may become really apparent to you. Aries, as you can see in the configuration that I've drawn, very, very clearly, we've got Saturn and Neptune in your sign, right at the beginning there, sort of 0-1 degrees of Aries, and right opposite is the planet Mars, and that's straddling the relationship axis. The full moon is in the middle of events somewhere. It's not tied up with these configurations, but nonetheless, because it's a full moon, the effects, you're going to feel them more, because that's what full moons do. Like the tides that they influence, high tides, then the tides of your watery emotions are going to be running high. This full moon marks the end of a gestation period. And you might want to go back to January, when maybe ideas were talked about the beginnings of projects happened. Maybe you met someone, maybe all sorts of things were put out at that point, and you're seeing them now, the fulfillment of that. And of course, with a gestation period, we often think about a baby taking 9 months to go from conception to birth. Then this is the end of a gestation period in sight, whether it is the end of the 6th trimester or whether it is, time for birth. But we can use that as a metaphor and think about the birth of an idea, the birth of something that has been percolating for some time. And it may be very successful as well. If we look at these kites that I was talking about and the mystic triangle, there's a lot of potential here. Remember, I talked about the idea of a gift. We think about in a natal chart, if you've got a configuration like this, it's either a karmic gift or it's a genetic gift, it's in your genes. Then we can see that perhaps the full moon gives the flowering of this gift. So there's a lot of good things potentially happening at this time or in embryo at this time. Another good word to use with this full moon on the 5th, 11th axis. Let's have a little bit more of a look at that Mars opposing Saturn and Neptune. Now, this could be, as I talked about it in the first part of my video here, it can generate chaos and confusion. You can feel disappointed and let down. And maybe that is because of a relationship or someone that you're involved with, whether you're involved with them in business, whether you're involved with them in a romantic relationship. You can feel very let down that that person has let you down, or you can feel very disappointed that things aren't working out the way you wanted them to work out. But have a look at this. Saturn and Neptune are sextiling Pluto and sextiling Uranus. And on the one hand, this is telling us that the universe is in charge here, and the universe knows what's good for you and what has to happen, even if you don't. But it also says that good things can come out of the disappointments that you are experiencing recently. But let's not also forget that there is a higher vibration, if you like, of that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And with Mars in tow here, we could be looking at this idea of a dream being realized, something that you have been hoping for, working towards. Suddenly, here it is, it's happening. So we've got two distinct possibilities. But if you're feeling, Aries, that somehow destiny is at work in your life at the moment, I would say that you are correct. But there's a but, a caveat. You have free will, freedom of choice. Therefore, the better your choices, the wiser your choices, the better the ultimate outcome, whether you're struggling at the moment or you're really in a very, very fortunate position. Taurus. If I was just looking at this full moon alone and we didn't have all this drama going on with configurations, I would still be looking at a very important full moon. The reason being, it's in the angular houses of your solar chart. So the sun is in the 4th house, the base of your chart. The moon is in your 10th house. And this is called the life direction axis. The midheaven, the 10th house, the cusp of the 10th house, it designates or describes who we want to be. This is when we decide, all right, this is who I am, the ascendant, pretty well the rest of the chart, but who do I want to be? Where am I going in life? What is my ultimate aim? That's all 10th house. And it can have a lot to do with your status in society. It can have a lot to do with your job. It can have a lot to do with the material world. The sun, on the other hand, is down at the base of the horoscope, the 4th house, and this is the root. These are the roots of the whole chart. These are your roots, your ancestors. It's your base in life. In other words, your home. It is where you've come from, your family. So this full moon is all about aspects, these aspects of your existence. Now, we could be finding a sense of union here. So things come together in a way that make you feel a great sense of achievement. My goodness, everything's worked out. How fabulous is that? I am who I've wanted to be. Things have come to a point where I'm looking out on my life and feeling very blessed. We could be looking at that. And that's because of the very powerful configurations that I spent some time talking about in the first part of this video. But it could be the very opposite of that as well. So we look at the sense of an ending. Things have come to the end. Does that mean a job is at an end? Does it mean that a happy family, the happy home is broken up? All these things are possible when we look at an astroscape like this. And we've also got a Mercury-Pluto opposition here, which says there's some tough talking to be done. There are some tough realizations to be made, and they can't be avoided. Even if, as we often are at this point in the year, on holiday, maybe the kids are at home, or maybe you've taken time off work. Often when we do that, we see in sharp perspective what's wrong in our lives or what's going on that we haven't had time to really look at and think this can't go on. And that demands a conversation. Taurus, I know you don't like change, but you know something? Once you get behind change, especially if it's what you think we should be doing, my goodness, do you do it well? And I think you just need to remind yourself of the past and in the past when you've made very big decisions that have led to quite big changes in your life, that actually you've managed them well and that good things have come out of them. And I see this very clearly in these diagrams that are, drawn out in red and blue for you here, that there is a sense that things are working out exactly as they should, even if you don't think it or feel it or sense it at this time. And certainly, I think consciously, if everything I've said to you up to this point is like a big fat, nah, I don't get that. It is a very good time to think about closing off things, activities, relationships that really you don't need anymore, because in the pursuit of being who you want to be, things that are taking up time or something you don't want to do, they should be done away with so that you can focus and have what you want in your life and be who you want to be in your life. And maybe this full moon, in its role of illuminating what is hidden, is doing just that. Gemini. If you look at the chart that's on the screen right now, you'll see on the left-hand side of the circle that television aerial, which is planet Uranus, because yes, planet Uranus entered your sign on the 7th of July, and it's going to have a big impact on you at some point during the next 7 years, because it's going to change a lot of things. And if you happen to be a May-born, have I got that right? Yes, a May-born Gemini, then you're going to feel it sooner than later. And of course, Uranus, as you will see by looking at the red lines involved, you can see it's part of this mighty configuration with Mars at the very bottom, opposing Saturn and Neptune. We see that on the 5th and 11th axis. So the strut is that Mars opposition Saturn and Neptune. I'll come to the other configuration in a minute. But this is a very important point in the year for you. Sometimes change occurs, and often when we've got pattern like this, they change without your say-so. Something happens and you think, wow, I never thought that would happen. Why? What? But you'll get behind it pretty quickly, and I think in fairly short order. you'll see the purpose. You'll see, what's going on. And remember, we've got that big Mercury-Pluto opposition, which tells you what lies beneath. You're going to come to a lot of realizations, either at the time of this full moon or in the following 2 weeks. There are going to be all sorts of conversations and revelations that's going to make a difference to how you view certain people and certain situations. And especially if Uranus is activating anything in your natal chart, particularly your sun or the ascendant or the midheaven or the moon, then you're going to be making some very, very big changes. The full moon itself is cutting across the axis of travel and communication. So there's a journey. It may be a literal journey at this time. You may be going away for your annual holiday, or you may be going away on business, or there could be some unexpected reason why suddenly you're going away. So the journey itself could be important, whether it's who you meet on the journey, what happens on the journey itself, or what happens at your destination. But really and truly, we're looking at metaphors here. So we're looking at this idea of a journey in experience, a journey in knowledge. So something is being revealed to you now, and you may not see it instantly. You may have to go a few steps into it before you realize what's unfolding. Gemini, you do like to have control, even though you're very adaptable and you love variety and diversity, and you seem to be extremely flexible and easy. Really and truly, you like the control that you have over situations. And I think what you're realizing at this point is that you do not have control. But understanding that, and yet still being able to retain your sense of self-worth, if you like, or exactly who you are, to know who you are in the face of so much happening around you, is very important. And remember, this full moon is about reaching conclusions, drawing conclusions, coming to understandings, every bit as much as it is about reaching a crossroads and making a decision thereafter, or going on a journey and making realizations and understandings about the journey itself, or on the journey itself, or where you have ended up. So very, very complex time, Gemini. And I think what you may be realizing, even if you always thought in a way that there was something bigger, a bigger plan, a bigger picture than, the one that the real world appears to suggest. I think you're sensing that right now. You're sensing there is a bigger picture, and you're beginning to feel your way into it, your part in that, and how much control you have and how much you don't. Okay. Cancer. If we look at the chart in front of you, you will see, or on the screen right now, you will see the full moon, and it's cutting across the 2nd and 8th houses. And these are the houses that revolve around worth, value. It's about your value as a person. It's about shared values. It's about how people view you, what you receive from others. And of course, that can be what you receive in terms of money as a salary. It can be what you receive in terms of your investments. It can be about financial relationships with banks and lending institutions and credit card companies. So we could be looking very simply at an agreement you're about to sign on the dotted line, whether that is on the full moon itself, we're looking at that Saturday, or whether it's just before that time or the 2 weeks following. There is going to be an agreement. There are going to be signatures on paper. It could even be about a property. You could be making a purchase of a property, and therefore you're putting your signature on it. And therefore, if you are purchasing a property, there you are adding to your value. And if you are selling a property, you're still adding to your value because you've the property is now worth something and it's in your bank account. So we can look at that on a very kind of surface level and see that dynamic. But this idea of inheritance, this idea of receivership is also within this full moon. And some of you will be already working with an inheritance. You've been left something and you're in the process of figuring out how it all works and when it's all going to get itself together. And this full moon might show you that that's it. We've actually done all the mechanics of things and the inheritance is done and dusted. On the other hand, it could be a settlement, a divorce settlement, a settlement having come out of a company and they're making a settlement, a redundancy settlement with you. Again, this full moon is saying it's done. There's no more discussion, it's done. Having said that, where do we find Mercury and Pluto? But we find it on this same axis. So there is a lot of discussion and there is a lot of deep, dark corners to get into in the pursuit of getting a fair settlement. That may just explain everything to you in very simple terms. On the other hand, it may be that you're not getting any of this because, finances are finances, you're on a fixed income, nothing to see here. But something's going on here. And it may have to do with, sometimes we lend money to people and they don't pay it back. And while that seems to be a kind of gross behavior, it also reflects somehow, even though we know it's not true, really and truly, it reflects on our value, as though somebody doesn't care enough about you or value you enough to pay you back what you gave them. Now, we can stretch that out as a metaphor and see there's a whole lot of other things wrapped up in this, especially in relationships. Are you getting value for what you have offered? And that might be to do with sex. It might be to do with the deeper layers of intimacy in a relationship. So this is also part of that full moon. But I want you to take your eyes away from the full moon at the moment and look at the red kite configuration. Look at that Saturn-Neptune conjunction on the midheaven, Mars below it. And think about, what is the 10th house? That is the area of life where we are aiming to go. This is our life direction. This is who we want to be. This is the axis, the bottom where Mars is, of life direction. It has to do with our family, our roots, who we are, who we want to be. And especially if you're a June Cancerian or you have planets and points around 0, 1, 2, 3 of Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, or Libra, then all of this is vitally important to you at the moment. It is a period either where you are feeling truly blessed by what is coming to you and what's going on in your life, this sense of how extraordinary the way things have turned out the way they have. But the opposite is just as true, that you feel everything is disintegrating, that the things that you had hoped for, the things you had built towards are no more, they are disintegrating. And that's making you feel lost, is making you feel as though you're a bit of a victim because you didn't bring this about, it's happened to you. So obviously, if you're feeling fulfilled at this point and blessed, then live this to the full, because these feelings are brief, they don't last forever, so live it to the full. On the other hand, if you are feeling victimized by a situation, remember it's temporary. And the important thing to realize, and again, it goes along with that full moon, you're at a crossroads and you're going to make a decision and you have a choice in that decision. And the higher you go, the more you rise above the situation in yourself, the more likely you are to make a good decision. And then what happens is the configuration, which is about a gift. Remember, I talked about that? Whether it's a karmic gift or whether it's a gift from, your genetic background, the gift can be revealed. The secret in the envelope can be released. Okay. Leo. Well, I think you can see the envelope very clearly on this horoscope that's in front of you. And of course, the sun is in your sign, the moon in your opposite sign of Aquarius. So this is a very, very important time for you. A lot of things sort of coming to fruition, or a lot of things coming to a conclusion. And I'm thinking of this time, and maybe I should have thought about it a little bit earlier, but of course, there are a lot of Leos, and I'm thinking in particular of the Duchess of Sussex, whose birthday is around this time. She's got this configuration happening and a full moon. And, you know, we're going to be seeing things in her life that really dramatically portray the complexity of these configurations. It is an ending in some ways, but it is also a release. Both those two things we can see, and apply that to yourself as well. What could work out this way in your life? What can you see drawing to a close at this time? What indeed could you empower yourself by and say, I'm done with that. That activity is done. That relationship is done. That thing is done. And by doing so, you release yourself for other things. I think that's the cornerstone of not just this full moon, but this huge configuration that's going on at the moment. It's about letting go, letting something complete itself, and finding your wings in the wake of it. And if we look at, well, the sun in the first house, your sign, the moon in the seventh house, a relationship is part of the story. And it can be any kind of relationship. Yes, it could be a marriage. Yes, it could be a love affair. Yes, it could be your relationship with a company. Yes, it could be a business partnership. It could be all those things. It's in there somewhere. It's part of the story. Another person is going to impact this whole sense of arriving at a crossroads, of letting something go, and in the process, finding your wings. The Mercury-Pluto opposition is key to this. Mercury will be in retrograde at the time of this full moon. It's making its way back, and it's already, Mercury has opposed Pluto exactly as it did on the 29th of June. So it may be that part of the year is important to you in regards to what you're going to be discussing or what's come up at this time. Mercury will go direct about a week after this full moon. And so a lot of things that may be a bit mysterious, a bit, unformed, a bit sketchy, will start to take shape once Mercury has gone direct, gradually. But there is a discussion in here. At some point during this full moon period, and again, we're looking at a few days before the full moon and a couple of weeks out after it, there's going to be a very, very big discussion. It may have legal overtones. It may have overtones about your future. It may have overtones about you. And the deeper you go, and I think I've said this to a lot of the signs, you can't skim the surface here. You have to be prepared to go deep, and you also have to be prepared for change. Things aren't going to be the same. After this, Mercury and Pluto, the configurations, the full moons and everything else, it's not going to be the same after it. Things will have changed. And when you think of that, sometimes a full moon can signify marriage. And remember, we've got Venus squaring Saturn-Neptune, and I talked about marriage in the earlier part of this video. But by the same token, as much as we can see marriage, we can see separation and divorce. They're both endings in a way, and it might even help to go back to the new moon in Aquarius, which was back in towards the end of January this year, and see that something that happened at that time is part of the reason you are where you are at this point in time. These configurations are the hand of destiny. And there is this strange combination of recognizing at times that fate has brought us to a certain point. But If we leave it at that and say, oh, well, it's fate, we then do ourselves a disservice, because what we need to do is make a choice thereafter, and make a choice, a wise choice, not a choice based on emotions, something that's like a knee-jerk response or made out of vengeance or upset. We need to make a decision that's going to work out for us in the long term. And the way to get there, even if we can't see where our decision will take us exactly, if we've known we've made it from a higher place, we will be doing the right thing. Okay, Leo? Virgo. How clearly we can see this envelope mystic triangle. It's there straight across your horizon, really. And these configurations are what we might call the hand of God, in a way, the resonance that's going, the sense of destiny. And when you think about it, a lot of Virgos in the world, you're not the only Virgo listening to me right now. And it will be different from everybody's perspective. You're a different age and a different place, a different time of your life. Everything's different. But there is a common theme here. And that is that you're at a point in your life where you sense that big things are happening, or that, whether those big things are happening directly in your life and you can see them, touch them and feel them, and they're personally centered, or it could be that you sense big things are going on in the world and that what's happening out there is going to make a big impact on your future, if you like. We can look at it in those two ways. And maybe it's both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. This is not a time to overthink anything, Virgo, and you're a bit of an overthinker. It's a time to release, really. It's a time to let events unfold. But at the same time, once they have unfolded, to make some kind of choice as to which way you're going to go. And there may be multiple choices, but I promise you at some point, which is the right way to go. Even if you don't want to go there reluctantly, it's the right thing to do, the right way to go. And that is absolutely what you should do. Do the right thing, go in that direction. That's going to work out well for you. If you take a shortcut, if you do something that you think will work with other people or it'll help you in the short term, that will be the wrong decision. You do have to do something that is going to be more geared to a long-term picture as opposed to a short-term picture. The sun at the moment is in the 12th house. It will enter your sign to a little bit later on in August. So you are at a point where a lot of things need to be reflected upon. It's a time of retreat. And I know how difficult it is to retreat in this modern world. We've got our phones zinging all the time with messages, whatever else is going on, it's all happening. It's very difficult to be in the silence. But this is a time when you need the silence. You need your own space. And you need to be a little bit more focused on getting rest, on sleeping more, dreaming more. And if there's one thing that Mars opposition Saturn-Neptune it's about dreaming. It's about the dreams you actually have in terms of your nightly experiences and what they mean, and those dreams revealing great truths to you. But it's also about having dreams and realizing those dreams in your life. And that Mars, Saturn, Neptune opposition is about that, whether you can see that your dreams are about to be realized or that they are realizable, or whether you realize that your dreams can't be realized. That's what you're playing around with in terms of the aspects. So this particular full moon is about enlightenment, and that enlightenment may come about in a dream, may come about in a moment of silence, or in a moment of pure joy, that kind of spiritual feeling we get when we're in a beautiful place, or we hear a beautiful piece of music, or something moves us. We are in a different space, and it's when we're in that space, even fleetingly, that we realize a whole lot of other stuff. And I think that's available to you, not just at the time of the full moon, a little bit before maybe, and in the 2 weeks after, with that waning period, and these structures, these geometric patterns, which have this celestial canopy over us for a while. This is where the magic happens. This is where all sorts of things that can come about are beginning to come about. And your connection with them is really important, even if that's just a mental, intellectual understanding of how big the picture is and your part in it, so to speak, or whether you feel truly enlightened and empowered to act from that point in enlightenment. As you can see, Uranus is at the peak of that rectangle shape, that envelope shape, and Uranus is about change. And if you have a birthday at the very beginning of your sign, that's round about the 21st of August, and in fact, there's going to be a new moon there in a couple of weeks' time, then change is about to happen suddenly and unexpectedly. And what I think this current picture is about, the full moon and this configuration, is the sensation that something is about to change. And if you sense that, there is preparation beforehand. I think that's really important. Pay attention to signals and signs. Whatever those signals or signs are, whether they're coming from other people, whether they're coming from what's going on in your life, whether they're coming from within yourself. Take note of them, because they are the precursor to the change that is probably going to come in very quickly and surprisingly more towards the end of the month. Libra. Well, just look at that Libra. As you can see in the left-hand sector of the circle, the horoscope, there is Mars in your sign opposing that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And that is forming part of one of the most important kites or configurations that we have at the coming time. And if you are an early Libra, which means you have a September birthday, then you are going to be feeling all of this very powerfully right now, and certainly around the time of the full moon and the couple of weeks following. Now, when Mars is in your sign, you are empowered. You have fire in your belly. You can get behind things. You are ready to take charge. And all of this is grist to your mill. But there's always a bit of a warning with that Mars opposition Neptune and Saturn. And remember, this is coming in right from the very beginning of August, the 1st of August. You're going to start to feel that coming in. Why it's a warning is that while the actions that you may decide to take could be part of your destiny, and you could feel that and sense it and feel very empowered by what you're doing, it is just as possible that the actions that you're taking are misplaced. And remember, I talked in the earlier part of this video about the negative side of the Mars, Neptune, Saturn, the chaos, the concealment, the fog, all of that. But also the upside, the positive side of this is divine action. And you can perpetrate the divine action, or the divine action can happen to you. And you may sense that. You may sense you were in the right place at the right time when something happened. But equally so, do we see the potential for you to step into something which you think is solid and real, and it turns out to have a lot of, there are things you cannot see. Let's put it that way. I know this is a difficult one to get your head around, because I seem to be giving you two very different interpretations, and I am. But we've got to be aware of both. It doesn't mean you can't make a bold step at this time. It doesn't mean that the things that happen can't work out very well for you in the future, but it would be wrong to think there's a guarantee in what's going on, that everything will be as it looks. The wise step is the one that says, I need to look at the details here. I need to, if I'm going to take a step, I've got to make sure that the sand I'm treading on isn't quicksand. So that's about research. It's about checking things out before you do them. That's why I'm giving you the two scenarios. When we look at the full moon, we can see this is cutting across the 5th and 11th houses. It's the axis of gestation. So something has come to fruition, or is shortly going to come to fruition. And of course, we could look at that very literally and think about a pregnancy and a birth, whether you're going to be a parent or whether you're going to be a grandparent. This idea that something is going to be born is quite literal. But it really is more of a metaphor, that something that's been incubating, an idea, a project, a possibility, is about to come into reality. The 5th, 11th axis is a very interesting axis because it has a lot to do with creation. It has a lot to do with love. It has a lot to do with kindred spirits, a lot to do with creativity and love affairs. It's a very important part of the horoscope. And often when you think about it, when we fall in love, and that's also what that Mars, Neptune, Saturn can be all right about. When we fall in love, we feel we are in a new world, but somehow we feel more of ourselves than we have ever felt. And there's something about this whole configuration here that makes me feel that those words are apparent to you at this time. You are feeling more of yourself than you have ever felt. And it is important to be that creative force, because when we're creative, we are doing something that comes from our central source, and that is not only destined, if you like, it's part of our destiny, but it is also incredibly fulfilling. And when you look at these configurations, the two kites and the mystic rectangle, the envelope, we know there's a secret in there, that there's something destined in there. There's something destined at this time that is important for you. And it may be that it comes along in the guise of another person or a new relationship or something new that comes in, is in fact represents the secret at the center of this particular configuration, and it will be unfolded to you in good time. There's also a journey here when we look at that Uranus in the 9th house, trining Mars, trining Pluto, coming back to trine Mars again. Journeys that you're taking lead to enlightenment. And if I just leave that as the end of this little section for you, just put that down on a piece of paper. Journeys lead to enlightenment. Then you'll probably find that manifesting in one way or another during the course of this full moon period. Okay, Libra? Scorpio. Well, you can see where the full moon is. It's going from the 10th house to the 4th house. The moon in the 4th house, the sun in the 10th house. We're on that all-important life direction axis. This full moon brings a conclusion to something. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, this idea of drawing conclusions can mean reaching an understanding. Oh, I get it. That's it. I know what I'm doing. I know what's going on. You're drawing a conclusion. But you can also interpret that as reaching the end of something. Is it the end of a time in a certain place? Maybe you're getting ready to move home. Or is it that a job is done and dusted? You're getting ready to leave a job. It could be either of those things. Or is it something that's happening in your life that you can see ends a chapter? And maybe that is related to your job or to your family. And you think, yeah, that's it. That is the end of a chapter, if not the end of an era. It's also a good idea to harness the potential of a full moon, which means shutting down things that are no longer fit for purpose. Now, sometimes we do this in an emotional kind of, in a response to something, in an emotional way. We say, oh, that's done, I'm walking away from that. And that's sometimes a bad thing because you haven't really thought it out. But if you've thought something out and you think, I don't really need this in my life anymore, this is done, it's occupying too much of my life, and really I need to have time and energy to do other things, to be in other places, then this is the time to empower yourself and bring something to an end, to do it. There's a lot of power in this astrology right now, whether you harness that power yourself or you say, or give other people power. Now, isn't it better to have the power yourself? Yes, of course it is. So you need to be empowered at this time and start making decisions, not necessarily in a way where you're, shouting and angry and all of that. That doesn't mean you're powerful. You can be very powerful in a quiet way and simply draw a line under something and say, okay, I'm done with that. Send an email, whatever it is, you're done with it. And I think I said I can't remember whether it was Aquarius, but it was maybe Taurus, one of the other signs, this idea in this complex configuration of letting go of something, reaching the end of something, and in the process, giving yourself wings. I think that's such a powerful kind of image. And, we think about the scorpion, we think about the eagle, we think about the phoenix, the idea of the phoenix emerging out of the ashes of something. Well, that's, the phoenix has wings. I'm not sure it can fly with them. Maybe I've taken the wrong image here. But the idea is that by letting something go, you are released for other things. And you can think that as well, if without your say-so, something ends at this time and in the middle of August. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the day of the full moon, the 9th of August. It can be around this time, but it will be related to this pattern that we're looking at right now. I think what I like about looking here and seeing the geometric configurations, the resonances between all those planets, that there is a sense of a divine hand at work. I think we see that clearly here. And when we see that, we must accept either that what's going on, whether we like it or not, is right for us, is often a very freeing thing. We are freed from the responsibility in a way, because this is meant to be and this is what is happening. Now, it doesn't mean we completely abdicate responsibility for ourselves, because once something is gone, once something is at an end, once something has changed, then we have some decisions to make. And if you look at the blue line, which links Mercury at the top of the chart to Pluto at the bottom, Pluto, your ruling planet, there is a decision involved in all of this. It's your decision. You're making the decision. You're at the crossroads. You have reached this point. Do you go left? Do you go right? Where do you go? But at the same time as realizing in the wake of events, you have a decision to make, there is also that sense of acceptance that this is the way it was meant to be. This is the way it was meant to happen. This is destiny at work. But in the wake of that, you have your own decisions to make. And I think that is at the heart of empowerment. So too is this idea of letting go and finding your wings. These are all images and statements that will be applicable to this complex configuration that we have with us at the moment, and will help you perhaps look at the events that are happening in your life and seeing them in a kind of much more dynamic and purposeful light. Okay, Scorpio? Sagittarius. I am immediately drawn to Uranus in your chart And you can see that it's in the 7th house. It is on the right-hand side of the circle at the 3 o'clock position, and it looks like a little television aerial. And Uranus is all about change. It's about, things happening that are innovative and you haven't done them before. They're about awakenings, epiphanies, things like that. So seeing as Uranus is a very, very important part of these configurations that you can see that I've talked about in the first half of this video, we can see that this is a time, first and foremost, of awakenings. The full moon itself cuts across the axis of travel and communications, which means there's a journey. Perhaps you're watching me now and thinking, oh, guess what? Yeah, I'm about to go on holiday. I'm about to make a trip somewhere. So that's true. But the journey isn't just about what you think it is. The journey is going to be far more important than that. Whether it's the journey itself, what happens to you as you are moving towards your destination, or whether it's what happens at your destination that turns out to have been all about the journey. A journey in knowledge, a journey in experience, a journey that will take you far, but far in terms of more than the place, if you like, but will move you in terms of your life path. Let's get it to be as big as that. And I think when we look at all these configurations and the blue and the red lines that are cutting across this circle here, we just have to know that this is meaningful, that this is by design, and that things that are happening at the moment are by design. Is that a comfort to you, or do you not like that at all? Well, there's certainly free will in here as well, and that's the most important part of everything. You may not be able to stop that person doing that thing. You may not be able to, be an architect of a situation that develops, but in the wake of that situation, you have free will. You have a choice to make, and that's where this is supremely important. We are seeing the harmony between fate and free will. We're seeing the roles they play in our lives. It's really etched in what we're looking at in this horoscope. Uranus is divinely connected, if you like, to Mars and Pluto, so there's a bigger purpose here. And we can also see Mars, the planet of action, opposing Saturn and Neptune at the apex of one of those configurations. That means there's an element of, well, I've talked about divine, that there is a divine essence here and a divine purpose. But it's also recognizing that you too are part of the divine, therefore your actions must be made in love and light. And I think when we do that with our actions, they're always right. It's when we act from our small self and when we act in anger or frustration that we're going to get it wrong. It's going to backfire on us. And when you see configurations like this and you know that there is a design here, you have to meet that design with the highest part of yourself and do the right thing and act in a way that you know is right and not out of negative emotions. We've also got that Mercury-Pluto opposition, which is in play. Now, for some of you, this is going to be about legal matters. So there is going to be something to sign, or there is to be something that takes a legal turn, or maybe you're already involved in a legal matter so that this full moon is bringing it to an end. And maybe a settlement is going to be forthcoming once that has happened. I'm always in favor of settlements outside court as opposed to going through all the court processes, but that may not be possible at this time. But whatever it is, justice will have been served. And although that's not going to apply to every Sagittarian, not every Sagittarian is going to have anything legal on their plate right now, but some of you are. And this is the important thing to remember. Justice is being served, because there is something very karmic about these configurations. I talked about that earlier in the video in reference to these configurations showing a karmic legacy or a genetic legacy, a gift, if you like, and the tension and the struggle which makes that, manifest. And we're seeing it in events, and you may be aware that while you've got a bit of a struggle on your hands, it's the struggle that produces the thing that you want, or the ultimate, the ultimate solution, whatever happens at the end of it. In many ways, you're at a very positive point of your life, Sagittarius. And I think this ability to look outside things, to not get caught up in the web of situations, is going to be important to you. If you can get out of the web and see more of the picture, the decisions you make and the things that will happen, you are going to recognize as being very good for you. And, as I said a little bit earlier, this idea of a design at work may be really living and obvious to you. Capricorn, the last sign. And look at what we have here. I think you can see straight away the red configuration. Mars at the top of your chart, Saturn and Neptune at the bottom, linked to Pluto and Uranus, and creating this dynamic configuration, which I talked about earlier in the video, because it is really about, if it's in a natal chart, I use the idea of a gift of some description. You have a gift, and manifesting that gift is going to be a struggle, but that's what manifests it. It's a struggle. And we can look at that to events right now, that there is a gift here, but you may not be able to see it, or you can see it, but trying to get it to happen is really the struggle, is the difficulty. But it's in applying yourself to that struggle that you get the gift in the end. And I hope that's made a real sense to you. And there's another kite, of course, which still involves Mars, still involves Neptune and Saturn, but we now have Mercury and Pluto involved as well, which says this could involve money. Whatever you're dealing with at this point in time may have a financial aspect to it. And what I want to say to you here is, don't get caught up with the money. Don't get caught up in the figures. Release all that. Allow the money to be what it's meant to be. Now, that sounds like a bit of a cop-out, doesn't it? But sometimes when there's a settlement to be made, or a sale and a purchase, there's a lot of argy-bargy and people saying one thing and you having to counteract. What really needs to happen at this point is for you to sort of say, okay, what's going to be is going to be. I'm going to relax my grip on this, because I am going to get what I deserve. What is going to happen is what I need. And if I try to argue, or if I try to promote my opinions and needs, it's going to be much more difficult, and I may not end up with as much as I could get by letting go. So often when we let go of tension, everything can work out just fine. And it's that principle that is at work. Now, having said that, obviously, I don't want you to, just throw your hands up and say, I'm not dealing with this anymore, and just let someone walk all over you. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you can decide and see what is justly right and what you can manage and what needs to be done, if you're in that space, that's a good space. And things that are meant to happen will happen, and you'll benefit from them. But if you struggle and you do something that, is going to prolong an argument or a discussion, I think it's in the negative. This is something that isn't going to work very well for you. Yes, you need to get deeply into something. You need the facts, the figures. You need to know the full story. But once you've got all that, let it go. Once you feel you've let go of something, things can sort themselves out. And even if I have been focusing a little bit here on finance, that's where that full moon is, it's on the financial axis. Even though I've been focusing there, apply this to any situation where you've been struggling to hang on to something or you've been fighting to get some. Let it go. Let it go and let everything sort itself out. I know for some Capricorns, this is not just about, well, I talked about finance, but it can be about where you are in life, your home, but also where you are in life in terms of your career, that kind of thing. And I think the same thing really applies. What's coming to you now, you've earned. So if you're getting a rise, you're getting promotion, you're getting to be in the spotlight, my goodness, you've deserved that. All these things are coming to fruition at a time they're meant to come to fruition. But at the same time, if things are happening and you feel your world is falling apart and things aren't coming together and you're losing more than you're gaining, see that as part of the design. You can't see where it's taking you. Remember the secret in the envelope. You can't see where all of this is taking you, but you have to trust it because these are necessary evils and they are taking you to where you will be happy to be and happy with outcomes. It seems easier said than done to sort of relax, Capricorn, but this is what you need to do. Just feel relaxed. Let things work as they're meant to work, and then you'll be in a good space when you have to make decisions, when your free will must kick in. Okay, Capricorn? Well, that's it. That brings me to the end of my video. And, you know, it's funny, I don't write scripts. I don't have sort of notes when I'm doing things sign by sign. I'm much more tuning in to the horoscope like a mandala, sort of walking in the shoes of Capricorn, Aquarius, whatever it may be. But it is interesting because I think you'll notice, and I'm not necessarily expecting all of you to listen to every single one of those sun sign interpretations, but it is interesting how what was coming through as I was talking was this sense of all those geometric patterns, the kites, the mystic rectangle, the envelope, the full, all of it, was that there is a design here. Things are happening by design, whatever they are. And we're talking a little bit more now in the sense of the world. We may be looking out on events and thinking, how did this thing happen? You know, why is that happening? That's terrible. That's not this part of the design. And we can't see it. Remember, there's a secret in the envelope. And we may never really get to know what's really at the base of it all. But what we have to do is recognize we're at a point in time where things must be the way they are and happening the way they are. We must ride this particular wave. And when we get to a point that we can make a decision or make a choice, when our free will can kick in, then we must use it with great wisdom and awareness and higher consciousness. Then we make good decisions out of the design that is at work in our lives. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that, and I look forward to seeing you next time, next video. Bye for now. Next video. Bye for now.